Hello, my name is Bernie Grummell from the Department of Adult and Community Education in Maynooth University. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about our experience of developing microcredentials in the Irish context. So some background to this is that Ireland was one of the countries in Europe that was the first to begin to develop microcredentials in the European higher education system. We did so between 2020 and 2025 in a 5-year project which was led by the Irish Universities Association with 7 different higher education partners, including Maynooth University. So we were one of the first European countries to begin to try and establish a coherent national framework for microcredentials within our existing higher education system. Microcredentials are intended to be short courses that are flexible, that fit the way people learn and work, that are quality assured and enterprise led. So it's about upskilling, reskilling, future-proofing and being inclusive. This was based on the European Commission's approach to microcredentials, in particular their guide in 2022 in terms of designing, issuing and recognising microcredentials, which gives the definition of a microcredential as a record of the learning units following a small volume of learning that can be assessed against transparent and clearly defined criteria and that are owned by the learner and are portable, can be standalone or combined, and are underpinned by quality assurance. So in the context of Maynooth, we then defined microcredentials as short accredited courses that could meet the demands of learners and enterprise. And microcredentials provided learning opportunities which were highly flexible, bite-sized and accessible way of upskilling and reskilling for learners. And these courses could be tailored around people's busy schedules, giving them the flexibility to learn at their own pace. So our microcredentials were aligned with our national qualifications framework, in particular levels 8 and 9, where we would typically accredit programs. The microcredentials vary in size and were awarded between 5 and 15 ECTs, with 1 ECT being equivalent to 25 learning hours. They were underpinned by quality assured teaching, learning and assessment and were delivered either fully online or in a blended or in-person approach. And most of them were offered part-time by Maynooth University staff and some of our associate partners. So within this, we approached microcredentials in the European broad framework where they could be positioned in our qualifications framework either as minor awards or partial completion of a major award, as a supplementary award or as a special purpose award. So in Maynooth University, we're still at the beginning of that process and we currently have about 20 microcredentials developed across the university, with the first being established in 2021. And they range in size from 5 to 10 ECTS credits. And typically, as we're a fee-paying university, the typical microcredential is about €600 for 5 ECT credits. And our enrolment numbers and success vary, some very small with only 2 or 3 on, some larger in terms of 30. And the overall current enrolment across the university is over 600 learners. So the key features of microcredentials in terms of kind of how we developed them was that they fitted in with the existing award levels that we provide in terms of level 8 at bachelor's or higher diploma award, or level 9 at a postgraduate diploma or master's award. They're typically either offered in person, on campus, blended or online. They vary in time with, say, blocks of 2 weeks or delivered maybe weekly or on 2 occasions during the week over 12-week period or 1 semester. And we often co-develop and co-deliver them with industry and community partners in many of the microcredentials. And some stand alone, while others can fit within an existing program, typically a master's program. So for us, our real learning over the last 5 years around kind of what's worked well in terms of the design process for a successful microcredential. First of all, that it's co-created with either our industry or community partners. And within that, we would always focus on identifying a very clear learner or market demand for the specific microcredential and the content and way that it is focused. We would try to not only co-create the microcredential with our partners, but also co-deliver it with our industry and community partners. Within that, we've also tried to draw on our existing resources in terms of our own expertise and background, in terms of kind of teaching the areas that we focus on, but also maybe existing postgraduate programs and modules that we already have on offer. And we try and align it with available funding for learners where possible. So for us, the key elements for a successful microcredential has been a really careful focus on the recruitment process, making sure that it is aligned with the particular community or group of learners and that it is addressing what they need and developed with those particular communities. To also pay careful attention to what delivery mode suits and also how we do that in terms of online versus in-person delivery and what suits particular groups. Another key feature for us has been network creation, making sure that the microcredentials are both tapping into and being co-developed by the broader network or community that they are coming from, so that they are something that's highly responsive and useful for the learners and that's based in their knowledge, their way of knowing, and their expertise. And within that, most of our microcredentials will try and connect academic and professional scenarios. So we're bridging both theory and practice and able to kind of bring in the experiential knowledge of learners and making sure that that is both speaking to the academic world, but that both are being co-recognized and are seen as equivalent and are recognized as equal ways of knowing. For us, the elements that have been more challenging or not successful, particularly they've been around kind of fees, the disparity in fees in terms of kind of different microcredentials being charged at different levels and it not being clear to learners the variation within that because of the different size and length and the different contributions given into the microcredentials. Many of our microcredentials have also been staffed by part-time staff who are often precarious within the higher education system. So that means that staffing can change year on year very quickly. The other element I think that we found challenging has been just our own ambition, planning microcredentials that are beyond what we can offer within our current department means. And beginning to kind of learn that maybe instead of trying to cram everything into one microcredential, that it might be a different microcredential, that our ideas might be 2 or 3 microcredentials, some working into the future. Within the way that we've developed microcredentials, we've focused within the clusters of microcredentials. And again, this is drawing from some of the European Union and broader definitions of microcredentials, where they can be really short, non-formal ways of learning in terms of skills accreditation, or more typically for us, they've been within the learning unit model, which is 25 to 150 hours of learning and awarded within the existing formal learning system and are quality assured and controlled within the existing system. And then there's also short learning programs, which at microcredentials are larger size programs and again formally recognized and set within the formal system and often linked to particular career paths. So for us, our learning over the last few years around what are the most important elements in microcredential design has been the following aspects: that they should ensure quality assurance and transparency throughout all aspects of the microcredential design and delivery and accreditation. That microcredentials need to be portable for learners and in a way that works and that is useful for them. That they need to be relevant. They need to speak to the types of knowledge that learners have, to the experience that they hold, and to the things and capacities that they want to learn, and that it needs to respond directly to that. That the assessment needs to be relevant, it needs to be embedded within the ways of knowing and the types of assessment that will be useful for learners and the type of learning that they are doing. That microcredentials should have a clearer pathway, and that often can be quite varied and can go in different directions, but that it should be clear to learners where the progression routes are. that it should recognise the variety of types of learning that is occurring, in particular, maybe the more practice-based learning that is part of industry, work and community life that may not always be recognised within the formal education system, to find ways of recognising that type and that variety of different ways of knowing and experiential learning. That the microcredentials should be based on learner-centeredness, and that they should be based around the interests and life world and experiences of learners and respond to their ways of learning and their ways of knowing. That all of this should be embedded within a very clear information and guidance structure so that learners know and that they know who they can talk to around where the microcredential will fit within their own learning journey and maybe what it could open up to them in terms of future potential pathways. So we hope this presentation has been useful to you in terms of the Irish learning about microcredentials. It's a pathway that we're still on and still learning about, and we look forward to hearing more about your learning within the space as well. Thank you.